Hi, it's Kathy from Books on at Bishopstone, and yes, I was going to originally do this video into like one long video of the 4 books that I've read while I've been recovering from my little face treatment, but I decided to break it up because the 2 books that I talked about in my previous video were 2 golden age crime books, and the next 2 books, even though the next 2 books have got nothing in common whatsoever, I thought it was better to have them separated. So I am going to start off with this book here, which the first thing I have to say, so this is called Grave Fairytales, a romantic novel by Esther Maynell. I think that's how you say her last name. The first thing I was taken with this book is, oh my gosh, look at this. This is just the cover. I was drawn into this. The first thing I would say is I was drawn to this because this is also a book that I have borrowed from a friend, and so what grabbed me was, like, I do like a fairy tale. I really, really love a fairy tale, a folk tale, a fable, and things like that. So, of course, and a grave fairy tales makes me think of Brothers Grimm, something a bit like that. All this wonderful, well, it's almost like looking like a bit of a paper cut type design here. Anyway, there's everything about this made me think, oh wow, the romance bit, maybe not quite so much, but and I have never heard of Esther Maynell before. Now, I was just looking to see if they had a little blurb on her. I did look her up a little while ago. Now, this book was published. Let me just get this right, if I can see when this was published. Just bear with me for a minute. If I can actually possibly open up this page here, I can let you know. If I can find it. Here we go. So it was, I don't know, the first Australian edition was 1944. So I don't know if that means that maybe it was written before 1944, but the first Australian version, which is this one has been printed in Australia. Yeah, so this is by Oxford University Press from Melbourne. So 1944, but this is set back a long time ago. We are talking back in, I don't know, would we be talking, I don't even know if they actually mentioned the year, but we're talking back, I don't know, 150 years ago, maybe. That's kind of guessing. I don't know. I mean, we have here the story of this. Well, before I get into what the story is about, I'll just premise it by saying this book was not what I thought it was going to be at all. From my first impressions of the title and the cover and everything, I was thinking maybe something grave, you know, like either death or some sort of, I don't know, like a ghost or a haunting or something set in, you know, in the countryside, something folklorish, something along those lines. It was none of those things, really. It was written, well, it is written in the style of a fairy tale, I guess, in that you have a castle, you have nobility, and then you have these very poor families and poor children. It is the story of 2 boys who come from 2 they come from very poor families, They both come from very different types of families, but they're both very poor and they're both very musical. One is musical, as in he plays the what's it called? Pianoforte, or the medieval, or not medieval, the old version of the piano. And the other one is has a really beautiful singing voice. So these boys are kind of taken from, well, not taken, I guess. They are kind of taken, they're saved, I guess, from their life of poverty by going to a nearby town, which kind of like gives scholarships in a way to young, poor children, and I guess trains them up to be in the local choir or the local band, and the nobility in that city is, I mean, they value music really highly, so they're really happy to sponsor young impoverished kids. They're happy to go around the state, and finding people who have a musical ability and bringing them back to their town and giving them like a scholarship type thing. So it's set in Germany, I think, I'm kind of guessing around the Bavarian kind of area. I mean, like, the book does say at the end that the two main characters are based on actual musicians. Look, music is not my thing, so I couldn't really even tell you, or even hazard a guess as to who those musicians were. I mean, this is kind of based along their lives, their mentorship, their the people they come across, it talks about their relationships. So it's kind of a folklore fairy tale that starts from young impoverished boys who kind of get taken to somewhere where they are given a different life. They are given tutoring. They end up becoming well known. The young boy who's a singer actually gets well known for storytelling, which I guess is a little bit like the Grimm's brothers kind of. I guess it reminds you a little bit of the Grimm's fairy tale type thing. Yes, I found it interesting. I guess if you are interested in music, especially I can't even think of the word of it. The word for that kind of music. Oh yes, you know what I mean. Olden time music. Oh my gosh. Now I sound really terrible, don't I? Anyway, look, if you're much more interested in music than I am, you would probably get a lot more out of this. You'd find a lot more interest in the musical side of it. I mean, I was interested in the story of them, the story of their relationship with other people, those who looked after them, those who there wasn't really anyone who took advantage of them, really. I mean, one boy came from a not very pleasant kind of family situation where his father was quite pushy, and I guess wanted success for his son so that he could have that ride on the coattails of that success. I think they both had totally different personalities. One was much more positive and upbeat. One was much more sensitive, and I shouldn't say negative, but, you know, he had been shaped a lot by his past. And it just follows them, you know, and their friendship through their musical life. And look, I mean, I did enjoy it. I did quite enjoy it because it's written in the style of a fairy tale, which to me, I really enjoy. This author I looked her up, and she has written quite a few other books, but she has also written a lot of books. I think she wrote a book about Bach and his life, and a couple of other composers as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. So much so that so she obviously, music is something that's really she's very interested in, and factual music, musical stories, life stories, are probably her thing. I don't know that I would go back and read any others of her book, not because I didn't enjoy this one, but just simply because music is not my big, huge, major thing. But if you're into music, I would say, yeah, this is a really, and you like a good story, this is great. You might even know who these people are. If you've read this book or you know anything about it and you know who these two characters are based on, I'd love to hear it. So just leave me a comment below and let me know. Yes. So that is that one. Now, the other book that I have borrowed from a friend is called Murder Revisited. So here it is. Now, this book is, as it says here, a new study of 2 famous poisoning cases. Now, I briefly talked about this in my last video as well. I'm also just trying to see when this one was printed. So this was printed in 1961. This book revolves around 2 poisoning cases, which happened, of course, much earlier than 1961. And this author goes back, revisits the 2 cases. They're linked in the way that they're both stories of husbands who are accused of poisoning their wives. And one is found guilty, one is not found guilty. So they feel that one inspired the other. And yeah, it's really interesting. It's actually quite interesting to read a book of, well, that was written in the 60s that looks at this phenomenon of true crime. I guess everybody knows that, I mean, human nature, we have always been fascinated by true crime and what the motivations behind true crime and why this is. And perfect example of this, of course, is a case that, I mean, has happened in Australia recently. Trial has just semi-recently occurred in Australia. That is the case of the mushroom poisonings, where a lady was found guilty of poisoning 3 of her family members, and they died from mushroom poisoning. A 4th survived but was incredibly ill. And just thinking about the amount of social media, news, interest, a number of podcasts that were made about that case and that event, and the interest that everybody seemed to have had in that, this book has made me think about that a lot. Made me think about attitudes of people who are on trial. And I think this is really interesting because in this case you've got 2 men, you've got juries made up of men, you've got not only other men on trial, but I felt like in this case the wives who were died, don't know, they were on trial as well. I mean, were they difficult wives? Did they bring it on themselves? I mean, were they unbalanced? Did they take their own lives? I mean, they really looked a lot into the wives, and I thought we have not got very far in society when we're still kind of looking at a murder case and the fact that whether someone is a nice woman, a good woman, what is seemed to be as a good woman, seems to bear a huge, it seems to be a lot of discussion about this in the trials for these two husbands, almost as if like there is a vindication, because if you're not a good wife, or you don't do the right thing, or you're seen not to be, you know, an easy woman, then maybe there was some justification for a husband to poison his wife. Anyway, I found this quite interesting, and I did spend a fair bit of time thinking about modern cases, the way we view it, and also I have been quite interested in some historical cases, as in like solved and unsolved historical cases to do with women. So I kind of thought this is really quite an interesting book. Maybe not a book that I would have necessarily picked up if I had seen, but because it was lent to me from someone else, I really enjoyed it, and very thought-provoking in terms of what happens today and what is still happening today, and the way that we portray people, the way we portray women, and just the interest of an actual court case, I think, is quite an interesting thing. I think it's yes, it's definitely a very interesting sort of it's an interesting read. Yeah, much more. I was pleasantly surprised. I enjoyed it more than I thought I would have. So, two very different books. Oh my gosh, two very, very different books. And if you've read this, I'd love to hear as well. I don't think that very many people would have read this book or come across this book. I don't think it's one of those books that's particularly well known, but interesting nonetheless. Yeah. And so the last one I have in my pile from that stack of books that I had been reading, which I haven't started yet, I still have this one to go. So The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, I still have this one to read, but at the moment I am madly trying to get through. I've got 2 book club books to get through, so once I've read those I will do a video on those and I'll let you know about those. Yes. If you have read any of those books, just let me know. Leave me a comment. I would love to know what you thought about either of them. And I will talk to you next time.